What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Miko, joined by my guy Morgan Cannon, and this is your go-to place for all things Lions related. That includes news, updates, and analysis, and so much more. Morgan, today we are in unfamiliar territory because we haven't been here in almost 3 months. We're at a point where we're going to be talking about a Lions loss, as the Lions did, in fact, lose their most recent matchup against the Buffalo Bills, score being 48-42 Lions. The Lions now go to 12-2 on the season, while the Bills go to 11-3. Not much else has really changed though, Morgan. Like, the Lions still are in the top spot in the NFC. Buffalo still kind of has that number 2 spot behind Kansas City. So a lot of things didn't change in terms of standings, but a lot of things definitely got changed in the minds of people after seeing this matchup, because like we talked about leading up to it, it was one that was being heralded as a Super Bowl preview, and it looked very much the part, especially near the end of this game when the Lions at least were trying to make that comeback. So there's a number of things that we got to get into when it comes to this game. We're definitely going to talk about what we think contributed to them losing this game. There's an onside kick conversation that we definitely have to have. We also have to talk about Jared Goff's performance, because even though the Lions did end up losing this game, it's not because of their quarterback. Like, their quarterback did everything he possibly could to keep them in this game. And I think Jared Goff still very much deserves to get his flowers, considering how he performed. But before we get into all of that, we got to talk about some of this injury news, because it's just continuing to come in waves. The Lions lose David Montgomery and Aleem McNeil for the rest of the season. Aleem McNeil suffers a torn ACL, while David Montgomery suffers a torn MCL. And they are also going to be without Carlton Davis for the next 6 weeks with a fractured jaw. So, Morgan, first and foremost, just thoughts on those, 3 new injuries. Oh yeah, I also forgot. They also lost Khalil Dorsey yesterday as well with an ankle injury. Obviously, he is also once again out for the season as well.
It was just such a tough day, man, because you saw the injuries happen, like the Aleem one, right? Like the Aleem injury happened the lone time in the entire game that the Lions forced an actual stop. Where they rushed him. The Bills had got a penalty. McNeil had a nice rush and then just landed awkwardly, like all on that knee. And you could tell right away something, it bothered him and he was mad. And that really hurt to see, because like even in that, like the one moment, like, okay, we got off the field, here we go, like you still had to deal with like, okay, and we lost one of our best defenders in the process. So yeah, it's brutal, man. I like, if you guys are familiar with this channel, we don't really spend a lot of time harping on injuries and what ifs, because every NFL team deals with injuries. It's just the nature. Football's a violent game. But this is rough, honestly, bro, because it's just getting chewed up. Like every level of the defense is dealing with something now. Like losing Carlton is huge. Like losing Aleem is bad, but man, Carlton Davis had been playing so well, like just incredible. He's a rock on one side of the field. Sometimes they have him travel depending on the matchup. So yeah, that's a huge blow, man. Like out of those 3, like him, Monty, and Aleem, like I think Carlton hurts the most in the immediate, just because like golly, you were leaning on that secondary a lot with everything going on in the front 7. And now you're losing one of your biggest pillars in the back end.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you there, because again, like, Carlton had been playing so well to the point where you were starting to see a lot of people even advocate like, yo, he needs to be re-signed. The Lions need to figure out a way of bringing him back, because he's been that, strong of a leader in the secondary and a great counterpart to someone like Terrion Arnold that's had his ups and downs, been playing a lot better as of recently. But like, it's one of those things where, when, like you said, when you're missing guys from your defensive line, you're missing guys from your linebacking core. At least you have, for the most part of the season, were able to say like, hey, at least we have our secondary though. At least we have our 2 starting corners. At least we have our 2 starting safeties. We have our nickel. Now you're losing, one of your better tackling corners for sure when it comes down to the run game for 6 weeks, and possibly like, yeah, maybe you can get him back if you make a deep playoff run. But as of right now, like you're kind of stuck looking for bodies. And the Lions do have some possibilities. They do have some guys that they can kind of rotate in and out. But those were the 2 guys, like, going into today, Morgan, I expected to get some sort of update, and I didn't expect the update to be good based off of Campbell's responses during the press conference yesterday. The David Montgomery one caught me clear out of nowhere, and it ruined my day. I'm not even going to lie to you. Like, I was so ready to just go crawl up into a ball and just be like, I don't want to talk to anyone today. I was done after that one.
No, I feel you. That was like the last kick in the you know where, in my opinion. Like losing Monty's tough, man. Like so much of this team's identity is rooted in what he brings to the game, into the offense, right? Like as a runner
Hmm.
with the offensive line, with the way Ben Johnson calls the offense. So it's terrible, but like, your next man upping, everything to the max, right? Like they're going to
Yeah.
talk to, I'm sure they're going to ask more. Hopefully it's a mix, in my opinion, of like a Craig Reynolds and a Sione Vaki. I don't want to put too much on Jameer's plate just because there is a good amount of football left, hopefully to be played.
Yeah.
So, you don't want to just run Jameer into the ground over the next 3 weeks, and then he's banged up for the playoffs. You know what I mean? Like you got to find
Hmm.
that balance, and it's going to be tough to do because so much of their success has been how they complement each other as players, how they're able to keep each other fresh for the most part. So yeah, you could tell Monty left the game for a little bit. If you guys are new to the channel, I go to every game, but I saw him leave, and that was a little concerning. And then he came back and was not really effective, but none of the running game was, which we're going to get into. But yeah, it was just a tough, man. This is a tough Monday for sure. This is a Monday of a Monday.
I was gonna say it's been the most Monday of a
Golly.
Monday that we've had to experience in, like I said, like the last 3 months. So shifting gears a bit, like I said, the injuries are unfortunate, but we know how this team operates, right, Morgan? Like they are absolutely going to live in that next man up mentality. Dan Campbell said it today in his press conference. A lot of guys are going to get an opportunity to prove something here. So whether that's a linebacker, a defensive lineman, a corner, or like you said, whether it's someone like Craig Reynolds, Sione Vaki, or even Jamar Jefferson, who has still been kicking around on the Lions practice squad, like all of these guys are going to have a chance to kind of step up and continue to help this push this team along. But going back to this game and looking at this game in totality, look, there's a number of things that we could point to that went wrong for the Lions in this matchup against the Bills. But when you take a step minutes and you step back from this game, because I know you've already started looking at some of the tape, what stood out to you as like, yo, this was a huge problem and it really contributed to the Lions not being able to get a win this week?
Yeah, so I was actually able to get through the film early today, which I'm excited about. We're recording this at like 6 p.m., so I could hopefully get my writing done before the Monday night games go. But it was weird because it was the first time in a long time you saw the Lions kind of get manhandled up front on both sides of the ball. Like they weren't really generating much of a push on offense. Some of the few of the successful runs they had were just Jameer bouncing to the outside and being faster than everybody. Other than that, there was a lot of just sloppy execution in the run game, but Goff carried things, man, is playing so well. That's another, if you want reasons for hope moving forward, like the rest of the way, look at number 16. That's all I got to say. Like he's one of them. So that was one of them. Like really just the lack of complementary football. Like you knew what kind of game this was going to be pretty quickly by how Buffalo was moving the ball. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, Josh
Yeah.
Allen's he's having really, guys, you look at it. That's if you want to feel a little less terrible, he's really looking at like 8 quarters of alien football now because they had that game against the Rams where I don't think they punted, and it maybe once where they scored 42 points and lost. So they were like, okay. And then they came to Detroit and then they had to score another. It was
Yeah.
48 points, and they only won by 6, right? So he just went crazy. Like he was just making plays, extending plays, shrugging people off like DJ Reader. He took a lick from Jack Campbell at one point, man, and just popped up. I was like, oh my God. Like this, he's a cyborg.
Jack and Josh got them both. Like it
Yeah,
was,
Pascal, I remember that one too, bro. You're right. Yes. Yeah. And it doesn't affect him, man. He's like some vibranium type stuff. If we're talking Marvel Universe, he's one of one right now. Like with respect to
mhm.
Mahomes and Lamar and everybody else, like everyone does things a little bit of a different way. But what he presents from an offensive standpoint is just so difficult to deal with. And I think the Lions just ran into, I know it's a tired phrase, but a buzzsaw. And the personnel, a lot of guys that are playing major snaps like your Quan Alexanders, your Jonah Williams, people like that, Jamal Adams, have only been in a town for a couple weeks, and they're dealing with this really complex Buffalo scheme with a Joe Brady. Like
Yeah.
it had vibes of the Baltimore game last year where only the Lions scored points here and kept it a lot closer. But when Todd Monken just threw the kitchen sink at us, man, and then this felt like Joe Brady doing that, just all the crazy stuff they were doing, and then Allen was just dropping dots. So it was tough, man. Bad complimentary football though, because you were down 14-0, just like that. I think they got one. The Bills in their first 3 possessions only faced 3 third downs.
Yeah.
Think about that. There were so many of those stats as I was getting through the film today. I'm like, holy cow. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. I think like what it came down for me is in the same vein of what you're talking about, and then not being complimentary football. Like for me, this was the most undisciplined that I had seen this Lions defensive line looked all season, and that's saying something considering how like long ago we lost Aiden Hutchinson, and that just shows like even despite losing Aiden, they were still finding a way of playing great football in the trenches and still being able to contain the run game and still being able to, again, maybe not always get sacks, but that's why they went out and got Za'Darius Smith, but like at least be able to affect the quarterback, and at least make things a little bit more difficult. And that just never felt like the case. It really did feel like you were just at the mercy of Josh Allen and their offensive coordinator, right? Like no matter what they wanted to do, it was working. If they wanted to do play action, it was working. If they wanted to do RPO stuff, it was working. If they wanted to run the ball, it was working. And it's something that we just haven't seen happen. And I'm not so quick, Morgan, to say like, oh, well, that's just because you have backup guys and because you've been dealing with that for weeks now. And again, no disrespect to James Cook because he's one of the only running backs I think so far this season to put up over 100 yards by himself against this Lions defensive line. And yet I still don't feel like that was the best running back that you went against. It was just the most dangerous offense that you had to go against. And a lot of guys just didn't play their best football. Dan Campbell said that, and it's very evident when you watch that game. Muhammad is someone that we've been praising the last couple of weeks of how he's been playing the edge. Had a number of plays in that game where he's crashing down the line and not reading these RPO situations well. And I think at the end of the day, the Bills came into Detroit with a game plan. And I think they looked at this defensive line and were like, hey, they might be difficult to run up against. Like if we just charge straight ahead, it might be a bit of a back and forth battle. I think they looked at that secondary and be like, hey, that's going to be a testy group that we're going to have to deal with. I think they looked at that linebacker core and there was like, there's some things that can be had there. And shout out to Ty Johnson, former Detroit Lion, for having a game because you look at that type of performance, 114 yards receiving is a big day, 5 for 5 in the passing game. And he torched every single linebacker that they put him against, whether it was Quan Alexander, whether it was Ezekiel Turner, like it did not matter. They all got the same amount of work.
Yeah, and credit to Ty Johnson as a receiver too, man, because a couple of those, it was Josh Allen and scramble drill where if you don't know what scramble drill is, the long and short of it is receivers are trying to stay within a passing relationship of wherever the quarterback is. So like whether you're working back to him or, towards the boundary. And a couple times Ty Johnson just broke free at the perfect time. And the coverage was pretty decent. Like I think one time it was Terrion where I was just like, gosh, man, because Terrion had done a pretty good job, but it's tough to cover somebody for 6, 7, 8 seconds.
That's
it kills you,
really
man.
Big point. Yeah.
Kills you. You can plaster like the best you can, and they did a good job several times, but then it's just, and those are backbreakers. And a couple times the coverage wasn't terrible. It wasn't great, but it was just such a good throw from Allen. Like he rarely missed, man. I very quickly, by like the third possession for Buffalo, I was like, okay, this is what today's going to be like because they weren't even really hiccuping. Like there was no like false steps. Like they were just, the execution was tip top. Like that's why we'll get into it, but you just had to figure something out on the fly because just like Sean McVay saw in the week prior, that's why they went for it like 3 times on fourth down. I think we recapped it in the last video, but that's the stuff that you just have to get aggressive because your odds of stopping this man, this mutant, whatever he is, are slim to none.
Yeah, and I think you look at the final score, right? And I think Buffalo came in with the same mindset, right? Obviously, they didn't have to go for it as much on fourth down, but I mean, the one time that they did, they went for it. They were 1 for 1. Detroit was 3 for 3 on fourth downs. Like it was a heavyweight fight. The issue was your defense was just taking more punches than they were giving, right? And definitely in comparison to Buffalo's defense, who went out there and really created a lot of pressure. Like to your point about, the Lions kind of getting handled in both trenches, Graham and Frank did not have their best game. And again, that's rare for them. Like they've been playing very, very well most of the season. They got Ed Oliver this week, and it did not go in their favor.
No, Ed got the better of Graham a couple times. I charted at least 2 free runner sacks for Jared Goff where it's tough to blame him because one was a play fake. So like it was backside. So he didn't even see it. He was just on him in an instant. There was a couple. There was one where Decker looked to pass off somebody because he had like a delayed blitz coming off the edge. But Graham was just a little bit slow getting out there. And that was a sack. And you're getting behind the sticks, right? So
Yeah.
the Lions weren't successful running the ball and they kept taking sacks. So it just consistently behind the sticks, and it just leads to the really just crappy complimentary football. Like Dan Campbell was like put it pretty simply. He was just like, yeah, we did not play good complimentary football. And that's how you get down quickly. You know, you were down 21-14, then 28-14. And it just, you got close. And the turnover was when the levee really broke, in my opinion. Like the Lions were staying within punching distance.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was just, I'm not really putting that on St. Brown, man. That was kind of a fluky turnover that really caught a lot of people by surprise. I'm sure they were probably talking about it on the TV, but like us
Yeah.
watching, we're like, why are the Bills offense coming on the field? And then they said that, and I was like, yo, no way. And they scored, I think, a couple plays later. And then I was like, oh, here we go.
Yeah. It's exactly what you're saying. Like that Saint turnover
It
was
was
weird.
huge.
Watching it, I was
Yeah.
like, because that's one thing I hated about watching it on TV is that they kept it in slow motion. And so it's like, okay, is this control because it's in slow motion, or was it like actual control, like in real speed? And so I was kind of surprised that they did flip it to a fumble, but it made sense,
Yeah.
right? I think he takes like 3 or 4 steps before he finally fumbles that ball. But I was like, man, I felt like you could probably argue that he didn't quite have control, but those are some of the things, Morgan, that I agree with you with. Like those are the things that really contributed to this team just not being able to pull out a win, right? Your defensive and offensive line get manhandled. You're not able to generate a strong running game. You allowed Josh Allen to do the one thing that we kind of highlighted in our film study that you couldn't allow him to do, which is allow him to extend plays and find guys open down the field. Those things all combined lead you to a 48-42 loss. One other thing, though, that's getting talked about a lot, it's getting probably even more conversation than any of the other things that we just talked about, is an onside kick decision that Dan Campbell decided to make near the beginning of that fourth quarter. I think while I think there is a reason to discuss that conversation, like that decision, that is not the deciding factor between why the Lions won or lost this game.
Yeah, no doubt. Like the way I look at it as like the levee, like we just talked about, broke with the turnover. Then you're really looking at it like, okay, you only have so many possessions left. And that's where I think Dan Campbell was like, all right, we have to have something shake out here. And I can see both sides of it. But you're looking at your defense and you're like, okay, at that point we've gotten one stop on the day. Like every possession that Buffalo's had, besides the one right before the half, has led to
Mm-hmm.
points. And then their missed field goal, which was crazy. How did he miss that? Like I was still very confused. So like at that point, you just have to kind of make a deal with yourself. Like, okay, we need to steal a possession essentially. So I get it. I understand the risk. But then we were talking about it like onside kicks used to be, we sound old, you
Mm-hmm.
know, you could maybe get an onside kick here and there if you executed it well. Like, and if you caught someone like especially surprise, like by surprise, like who did the onside kick out of the half in the Super Bowl? I forget who that was, but
Ravens.
yeah, like boom, dude. Like you can really like you can catch someone lacking and you can steal a possession, which can be the difference in a game, in a close game. But now with the dynamic kickoff, you have to say, okay, we're onside kicking. They get their hands team out there, and then to add insult to injury, Mac Hollins, who God, man, that he's on my all annoying list now. Like
Yeah.
he was acting like a turd the whole game, man. Like I did not like. Yeah, I don't like
Yeah.
him.
No.
Don't like Mac Hollins.
No, not a big fan either. So I was on the other end of this, right? Because, like, obviously, like every other Lions fan, this was a topic of debate on whether or not this was a good decision or a bad decision. And I did. I felt more so on the it was a bad decision angle of this for that reason of just like it just felt like it was too soon. I understand the mindset that Dan could have in that moment, Morgan, where he's like, "Hey, let's try and steal a possession." I'm all for that. My thing is though, your offense had just went down there and trimmed it to 10. The last time your defense was out there, you held them to a field goal. And that only took up about 3 minutes of actual clock to be able to force that field goal. I get that it's a situation where like, hey, Josh Allen has been running up and down, right, the field against your defense. I still would have rather had punted or kicked it off, had them have to start that from the 30 or possibly even the 20 if you get like a good enough kick and you get like a really good stop. I would have loved the opportunity to see if that defense could have done it again. If they could have forced another field goal or even better force a punt
Yeah.
or a turnover, right? And it's like you said, because of the way the kickoff rules are now, where you have to declare an onside kick, it's something that I just didn't love in that moment because, like you said, like there is no catching them off guard, right? And so even if you're talking about, well, like, hey, you have to execute that play better, there's been what, over 60 some odd, like, onside kicks so far this season alone. And there's been 3 actual like conversions of that. Like execution is like the margin for error on an onside kick is so small. And obviously for the Lions, it went the worst possible way where you not only don't get the football, but it also turns into a return as well. Like it just didn't feel like the time for that type of risk. But I can also sit back and say that's not why you lost the game. Like there were a number of other failed things within this game that led to that decision even having to be made. If the game was played better, if your defense was playing better, if your run game was working more effectively, you never get to a point in the game where you have to make a decision like that at 12 minutes in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and I see the other end of it too, because like I get trying to kick it deep and just hoping and praying like something happens. Maybe they'll turn the ball over, maybe they won't execute one play and you can get off the field. But then I get Dan Campbell's thought process. It's almost like the conversation with the analytics people when you're talking about going for 2 early on in the process. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I get it. Like, and you're there's that mindset where you try not to save the most stressful part of the game for the very end, right? Like try to get it like.
Right.
Go into those last 3 or 4 minutes with more data. So I get both sides of it, but yeah, it just went completely off the walls. And that was another backbreaker too, man. But I will say the team didn't lay down, they kept on getting off the mat. Like, even though like the game wasn't as close, obviously, as the score indicates,
Mm-hmm.
but they also didn't just lay down to where like, I feel like other teams would have been like, all right, we're about to lose by 30 today because we can't stop this man.
I was gonna say, right, like even with you giving up a touchdown, right, 12 minutes in the fourth quarter, 9 seconds later, Bills are scoring. Lions get the ball right back, go down to get a touchdown, right? Bills, they get a stop, they get another field goal. Lions get the ball back, they go right back down there again, get another touchdown. So like to that point, this team never really gave up, and I think that again points to the other thing that we were going to talk about today, and that's Jared Goff's performance. Like when everything else isn't working, it's nice to know that you have that quarterback. Like everyone's talking about, and rightfully so, talking about talking about Josh Allen being an MVP candidate. And at this point, after how he performed on Sunday, like it's his. Like in my
For
mind,
sure.
like
Agreed.
it's more than likely his award to lose at this point. But Jared Goff also showed why he was in that conversation, or why he's still in that conversation right now with how he performed, being able to put up almost 500 yards of passing yards, 5 touchdowns. Like the man was doing it all. And again, we talked about this before. Even when his offensive line wasn't playing at their best, he was still finding a way of playing at his.
Yeah, man, ran for a first down. The first touchdown when he extended the play and found Tim Patrick when Tim Patrick had that nice dive for the score. Goff is balling, and I just hope he continues because we're going to need him to play really well now. If I'm guessing, just keep that play way, way up here.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like if anyone, I just want to get this out. If anyone's really hating the Dan Campbell decision and they're just like, oh my God, like how could you think about it like this? So the Lions, the next time they kicked long, like we talked about, Miko, the Bills bled 5 minutes off the clock and then kicked a field goal. At that point, you needed, in order to make it a game again, 2 stops and 2 scores. So it's, you're just between a rock and a hard place. So I can get both sides of it, but I think the people that either like hate one side of it, I think you're just overreacting in the moment because we finally lost for the first time in 3 months. And I will say, man, people did not handle everything well. Golly, everyone was freaking out,
I was gonna save that for like the end of the video. Like, yeah, people do need to find a way of just like
12 and
calming
2.
down, right?
Yeah.
Like they're 12-2. Like
One
that
seed,
needs to
still.
be like constantly like reiterated. And I get it. The injuries are piling up. the things aren't looking great, right? You still have to play 2 games in your division. You still have to play a 49ers team that got a little bit healthier on the defensive side, right? And so there's a number of things that the Lions still have to take care of, but they are still very much in control of their own destiny, right?
Yeah.
And so it goes back to like what we were just saying when we were talking about this topic. Like, I don't think it's the thing that should be like dominating the conversation. I understand why it is though. It's dominating the conversation because it's the most tangible, like head scratching moment in the game was that kick. People are forgetting everything that leads up to that kick. And it's the same thing we said, like you pointed out the 2-point conversion, like going for the 2-point conversion earlier in a game versus later in the game. It's the same thing with the fourth down conversation, right? And I've been a big proponent of like, hey, people don't hate fourth down, like going for it on fourth down. They hate the results. It sounds a little like hypocritical when talking about the onside kick. The only reason I say the onside kick is different is because of the percentage of like actually converting it. Like it's so much lower than going for it on fourth down.
Yep. There's a reason the competition committee, apparently there's whispers of, them re-examining the onside kick. And I think something needs to shake. I don't know about this like one play on offense where it's like 4th and 25. I don't know about that. I've heard stuff floated. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah,
what do you think?
I didn't know. So I did not know that the onside kick had so many rules attached to it. Because watching the broadcast, they were like, you have to be trailing. It has to be in the fourth quarter. And there's like one more stipulation for it. And it's like to run an actual football play. Like you have to, all of those things, you have to have all of these conditions met to run a fourth down, like to run an onside kick. I understand the safety of it. I feel like there has to be another way of going about it because at the end of the day, like onside kicks can still be dangerous. Like that's the other thing that's like still crazy about this. Like that last onside kick that the Lions did could have been way worse if it wasn't, Jake Bates, the one that's like going in there to try and get that football. Like, could you imagine if that's a safety that's just like, I don't even care about the ball. I'm just trying to make sure you don't get the ball and I'm just going to like launch myself into you. I think those are the aspects of the onside kick that you need to be more concerned with is like, how do we keep players from launching? How do we keep players from, trying to take guys out when they're trying to make a football play, but you're trying to make contact? Like, how do we fix that? And I don't think just like having the ability to announce or declare that you're going to do an onside kick is that thing, right? You're already taking a play that's already like a 1 in a million shot of working and making it 1,000 times more difficult to where like what's really the point unless you're going to do it like the Lions did in the last one where it's like, hey, there's 12 seconds left, either we get this or we lose.
Yeah, it's tough to execute. Like, and I thought Bates hit a pretty good ball because I like, really you want that ball to jump right at the line of scrimmage and hopefully it hits somebody or somebody bobbles it, and that's really your best chance of success. But Holland's made a good play, but I don't like him. I hope yeah, it'd be cool to play the Bills again and get some get back one day, maybe in February. Who knows? We'll see.
It'd be nice. Going back, but with that said, let's get back to Jared Goff because, like I said, I did want to get your thoughts on him and just like his overall, like, again, like he's somebody that I think has really won over Lions fans this year, probably more so than other seasons because of how many games where he's had to put this team on his shoulders with all the injuries that have happened on the defensive side. Obviously now like they're going to be without, Monty for the rest of the season. Like, how much more do you think he's capable of actually doing going forward?
I think he's capable of carrying an offense despite what people may think, or have preconceived notions when he got traded to the Lions. But you've seen it. Like the Lions run game was not good yesterday. And they had to throw the ball 59 times. And that's tough for anybody to do, like throwing the ball almost 60 times in a game. So to be able to do that, and Buffalo was sending heat, man. They were trying to get free runners. He did a good job again of navigating the pocket. He's sneaky picking up like a first down like every week with his legs too.
Yeah.
Like doing his best Vanilla Vic impression. So yeah, I think he's perfectly capable of leading even with a banged up defense and now a little bit of a banged up offense. I would not be surprised if the Lions make a deep playoff run, obviously, just because the Goff is playing that well and he doesn't flinch, man. I give him credit. Yeah, we're down 21 and we just tried an onside kick and now they're up, boom, boom, boom. Just he's like, all right, one down at a time. He's got some very like some California coolness to him, where he's just like, all right, we're good, one play at a time. I love that
Yeah.
about him.
No, and I think that's what, again, I think that's one of the things that's made him very endearing to Lions fans. And I think, like you said, they're going to need it down the stretch, right? They play a Chicago Bears defense next week that's kind of middle of the pack when it comes down to, pass defense and things of that nature. Then they have to play a 49ers team that doesn't have a lot to play for, Morgan, but that secondary is still pretty stingy out there. So having to go out to San Francisco, having to, square off against that team. And then you get a Minnesota Vikings secondary that's more so near the bottom. So again, that's a more favorable matchup. But I think if you're Ben Johnson, if you're Jared Goff, like you kind of know going down the stretch here, like, hey, it's going to be, we're probably going to ask a little bit more of you. Maybe not, hopefully not, 58 passing attempts and things like that. But there's going to be, Jared's always been much more focused on efficiency than necessarily like total yardage output. But there may be a little bit more of that. Like you said earlier, Jahmyr Gibbs is probably going to have to take on a bigger load in terms of carries per game, going from like his, 15 or so to probably closer to 25 to 20. And then you're going to try to probably figure out ways of sprinkling in Craig Reynolds to give him a break here and there, maybe a few more touches to JMO or Amon-Ra in the run game. But it's going to be interesting to see how this team kind of finishes it out, because I get, like we were talking about earlier, I get how people may feel like it's doom and gloom, right? Morgan and I didn't feel great either seeing all the injury news roll out. But at the same time, this team has sustained blow after blow after blow, and they've found new ways to win each and every week. And so looking down the final 3 games of this season, the number 1 seed is still the priority. The number 1 seed, winning the division, like both of those are still the top priorities. But this is still a team that's going into the playoffs, and I still think it's a team that no one wants to necessarily see in the playoffs if you have to play them.
Yeah, and that means on the road too, man. Like, if the Lions ultimately do have to play a road game in the playoffs, that's fine. They've been awesome on the road all year. Like,
right.
So I'm not tripping at all. Like, yes, the injuries suck, but you still have difference makers at every level of the defense. You still have BB, Kirby Joseph, Jack Campbell's ball, and hopefully you get Anzalone back. Getting Rakestraw back would really help, just to have another viable like young corner out there that has some upside. We really haven't seen much from him, so maybe he comes in and he can compete right away. Like, maybe I'm excited to see what the week brings, and we'll kind of get a handle on what they're probably going to do defensively, because I think that's going to be a big talking point moving forward. So yeah, it's not all doom and gloom, guys. Yes, it was a rough Monday, but you know what? Tomorrow's Tuesday. The Lions are back on the road. It's going to be fine. 12-2, still in control of our own destiny, like you said, Miko.
Absolutely. So with all that said, guys, let us know what you guys are thinking in the comment section below. How are you feeling on this Monday? How are you reacting to the injury news? Where do you stand on the onside kick conversation? And overall, like, what's your outlook on this team as we try to close out this season? Also, if you're looking for any more Detroit Lions content, you can always go to check out prideofdetroit.com. There are new articles being uploaded all the time. Like Morgan said, he just finished doing a film study of this game, so definitely be keeping your eyes on the website to see what his observations were that contributed or that really stood out from this game. And like always, if you are looking to stay locked in with all of our video content, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and both of those things will not only help out the channel, it'll also make it easier for you to find our content and be notified when we decide to push new content live or go live over here on YouTube. So with all that said, I'm Miko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and go Lions.